Hi, I'm Liz Conway. I am a volunteer with the Fairhope Public Library on the Oral History Project of Veterans. Today we're talking to Lance Crabtree about his service. It is June 2nd, 2021. Lance, if you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Lance Crabtree. I currently reside in Fairhope, Alabama. I am in the United States Army Reserve. I commissioned in November 2019 as a captain.
What led you to become part of the reserves?
I've always wanted to serve, but with college and going through some things, I tried to join the Coast Guard, and they realized I had a full ride for college, and they were like, "Why are you joining as enlisted? You need to become an officer." And then I chose the healthcare route, so I finished my schooling. And I pestered my wife for about 8 years, and she finally let me join the reserves. I told her it was my only regret in life. I made a bunch of mistakes, and of course you learn from that stuff, but my only regret was not to serve. So
You went in as a captain. Can you tell me how that happened?
So as my specialty, I am a 66 Foxtrot or 66F. I am a CRNA. I provide anesthesia. And so with the direct commissioning they do, because I have a national licensure, they let me accrue, they counted my time that I've accrued via school, actually practicing as a registered nurse, and then going to school and then practicing as a CRNA. So with the time accrued and right now it's called a critical wartime shortage, they commissioned me as a captain.
Great. Now, where have you served in your reserve service?
So currently I am a part of two branches. One is the 75th Combat Support Hospital out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's my the main person I respond to. However, because that is greater than 50 miles from my geographic location, I am also part of a program called APMC. It only has about 3,000 soldiers in it for the whole country, but they are kind of like the specialty, mostly healthcare, physicians, nurses, microbiologists, and typically those are people that are too far away from a designated healthcare unit, and so that's why they created the APMC. So with them, I can kind of train on my own as long as I maintain the standards that I've upheld to hold and report back monthly. And then I can also have to meet certain requirements. So I actually, in February of this year, which is 2021, I spent a month in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is very cold in February.
Wouldn't have thought that. Good to know.
The high one day was 6 degrees. The wind chill was about -20. So we shoveled snow with cardboard boxes. But it was an experience, and I was actually very happy to get outside and get moving. So
Great. Has the COVID pandemic affected your military service?
It did significantly. So I commissioned in November of 2019. However, my wife's Social Security number was incorrectly entered on my paperwork. So once that was cleared up, was actually February of 2020, and I got word, hey, you're commissioned, everything's good to go, and then basically the Army, as everything else, just shut down completely. So we went completely virtual. I've attempted to go to Tuscaloosa, which is kind of funny. I've been in for a year and a half, and I haven't actually seen my unit. I've tried, every month I've tried that they actually started physically going back in person. It got canceled, whether it was like a increase in surge in the numbers at the actual geographic location. Because being a combat support hospital, most people, I'd probably say at least 50% of the people are from outside the 50-mile radius. So we have people flying in from Georgia, Louisiana, Tennessee all the time coming in. So just to increase risk, they kind of step back. And then especially with healthcare workers, we've had they made us stop traveling just because of the increased fear that we would need to be mobilized somewhere pretty quickly.
So do you have any thought that you will be deployed somewhere anytime
Actually,
soon?
so in order for me to go anywhere, I have to be qualified as a qualified soldier. So once you commission as an officer, you have 36 months in order to complete 2 training sessions. So the first training session was 4 weeks in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. It was kind of the Army's introduction into the military. We did marksmanship, land navigation, physical fitness, and a bunch of classwork, really. And then this was kind of the crash course. It was like a gentleman's course for basic training, and then I am scheduled to go to San Antonio in 2022 for another 4-week session. So that 4-week session is more military medicine focused. And then after that, I'll be a qualified soldier. And as a CRNA in the reserves, I'm pretty lucky because my limit of deployment or mobilization is 90 days, boots on ground. So it'll be about 100 plus or minus travel. And then I can pick my deployments or mobilizations. I have the option of saying I want to go somewhere if somewhere opens up. So I will not be eligible to deploy until summer, but I'm sure once I complete my Phase B instruction, I'll be pretty open to going somewhere pretty quickly.
How's your family feel about this?
My wife, well, her deal was that first where the kids were too young, which was understandable, and then her deal was she had to finish her master's degree, so, which she did, and then she let me join, but it was a huge shock to them. Currently my kids are, well, at the time they were 6 and 4, and me being their life every day and then just kind of whirlwinded out for a month was pretty tough. It was tough on all of us. The first week was just a new routine, new life. I was fortunate enough because of the pandemic, they let me keep my cell phone for communication, and so I could FaceTime them frequently, but it wasn't the same. But just them supporting me was probably the hardest part, just being gone from them, which I'm sure everyone goes through. Being there with other people was greatly beneficial because everybody had the same purpose and drive, and everybody had sacrificed. So it was tough on the little ones. I was happy to see them. Just seeing them scream coming down the terminal I probably was halfway back on the plane and maybe the second to the gate to get out. So it's still kind of emotional this day to think about it.
Normally, recruits are 18 to 21 years old, and you're young, don't get me wrong, but how was that?
It was kind of funny. I was definitely not I was not the oldest. There was several people, nurse practitioner that I became really good friends with who lived out. He was in his 50s. He'd been in the Marine Corps and just missed it. His son actually was enlisted in the Marine Corps, so they kind of went back in at the same time. A nurse that I met from Oregon, she was an ER nurse, but she was in her 50s as well. Her kids are grown, and she's actually from Russia, but she wanted to get back to the country. But statistically, I was probably the top 10% of the age group. But it was honestly fine. As a healthcare professional, typically when you join, we have so much training and stuff that goes into it. So typically when people come out, they're usually 30s, and I went to training at 35. Physically, I was fine because I try to stay at least somewhat in shape currently. But it's kind of funny. They called. I was grandpa and there was another grandma because we were asleep by 8:30 every night. The younger ones hung out a lot more, but that was after we had our quarantine time of 2 weeks. People came out a lot more, but I was usually in bed. But I also typically wake up at 5 a.m., so I was up just moving around before everybody else typically.
During the period that we're in now, what role does the reserves play in your life?
As far as like a monthly time commitment, it's with technology, fortunately we communicate a lot with my platoon every day. Most people are a phone call or email away or text message. I'm committed to 2 8-hour training sessions a month but that just varies on the month of what needs to be done. We get a schedule out, a yearly schedule for the actual unit, and then I actually have to meet some requirements. So I would probably say I'd probably spend about 20 to 30 hours a month just doing military stuff, as far as just checking emails and keeping in touch with people, and on top of that,
I hear wistfulness that you hadn't done it sooner. Or upon reflection, are you glad you went into the reserves when you did, or do you wish you had done it when you were younger?
I'm very happy that I finished my college degree. I think if I would have went in when the kids were young, I wouldn't have. I think now I have a better chance of having a longer career, because with the surge of everything that was going on at the time that I was finishing school, I would have probably done 2 deployments by now, easily, not including every other training I've had to do. And so with the kids being young, it would have put a lot of stress on the family at that point. I personally feel that they're older, so they're able to understand more than what's going on, versus as a 2-year-old being gone. And usually, to me, it was the perfect timing for what happened. Everybody was kind of in a routine, and now they understand that, hey, this is what I do. And I try to reiterate, there's a lot of people with just normal jobs that have to travel, and they're gone for 2 weeks at a time. I grew up in a small town. A lot of people work construction. They were gone for months at a time. So just my little time that I'm gone for currently is not that big in the grand scheme of things. And I'm also trying to incorporate them into going with me places. Say, for instance, next month I've got to go do a training session in Tuscaloosa, and so I'm going to just take them with me since it's summertime, and then we can make an experience out of it. And then next summer, fortunately, if everything works out as planned, my wife's parents actually live in San Antonio where my training session is, and with her being a school teacher and my kids being young, hopefully they can spend at least a couple weeks out in San Antonio, staying there.
Having a lot of fun at a lot of places.
Having a lot of fun and just spending time with family, because typically we only get to spend about maybe 1 week of quality time with them. So having 2 weeks of being there every day will make their heart happy. I extremely feel that way. And I'm fortunate enough, as far as this training, from what we've been told, is I get off 1 day a week. So I'll have off one Sunday to see them, 1 full day to see them. So that I'm pretty excited. Hopefully it all works out. The schedule always changes, but
nothing but flexible.
It's the little things in life that make a difference. So
the children, are they old enough to be real proud of their daddy?
My oldest is 7, and she gets excited when I put on the uniform and head out. She kind of gets sad too, because she knows I'm leaving. The 4-year-old I call her a whimsical child, and she loves to dance and just be silly, but she when it hits her that I'm gone, it hits her. I don't know if they fully understand, but I think one day they'll reflect back on it and see the pictures, and hopefully watch this video in 20 years.
Why the Army?
So I actually, we toyed with the idea. So my best friend, who I met the end of my senior year, he was going his freshman year of college. We were just meeting at the time, and he was a private. He went for a year at the very beginning of the Iraq War, and he said he was very fortunate because the violence hasn't increased at that point. However, he came back and joined ROTC at the same school I went to, Southern Miss. And so we kept pretty close in contact at that point. And then we've split ways just from him being deployed. He loved the Army, but he had always talked about there was these special surgical teams. And so typically a surgical facility in a war zone is very highly contained and fortified. But the issue with that is, especially in remote areas, they were getting too far out to receive immediate help. So him being what his job was in the special forces, he was intermingling with some special medical teams that were able to respond very quickly because they were outside the wire, still within safety, but within a few minutes of being able to directly help. So every time he came from a deployment, he would tell me about these. So I actually tried to, I looked into the Air Force, which has a team. They were just standing up at the time for the reserves. And so they were looking for people. However, the recruiter for the team was super informative, very willing to work with me, and she was amazing. But I had to go through the recruiter for the Air Force in general for the healthcare side, and she really didn't know much about it at the time, and she was basically like, you can't join the Air Force, we're full. Even though she talked directly to the recruiter for the other team. So that one threw that one out the window. And then it was between the Navy and the Army, and a good friend at work that I work with was in the Navy Reserves at the time. And so he had all the contact information. And I kind of had a little more familiarity with it. And then my wife, being the daughter of a retired Navy person, she was fine. She was a little more open to the Navy. But some paperwork issues happened with that, and they deemed me not credentialed, which is kind of strange because I am credentialed.
Yeah.
And basically, the recruiter, who was also amazing, said, look, this is going to have to take literally an act of Congress to get this gray area finalized. And so he said, the Army spot is open. And as a kid, I played with Little Green Army Men. I played in the woods consistently. So that was my first choice anyway. It was just a long roundabout, about 8 extra months of paperwork and talking that got me into it. So it was kind of funny. As of now, when the Army, once you sign, you have to go within 2 weeks to do a physical fitness test. And if you don't meet your criteria, which medical has the lowest physical fitness criteria, just due to the nature of work, I'm not loading ammunition into a howitzer. And so we have to go take a test. And so I went and took my test, and I passed it, and I was leaving the recruiter's office. And so the Navy recruiter called me and said, hey, literally the act of Congress was cleared up. Would you like to join the Navy? And I said, no, I'm already part of the Army. And I told him thanks for everything. So that was the roundabout way. But as a kid, it was always Army. But that was just what happened, worked out. And I wouldn't change it for anything. The Army's been amazing to me as far as communication, flexibility, and just they give you a long window heads up of what's happening. So it helps you plan. Typically, I know within a year, easily within a year of what's happening with my Army career. So,
in case of a national emergency, however,
I will be gone within. I could be gone within a couple weeks, which is understandable. And as I would just say, as a massive earthquake with Haiti, they have a lot of capabilities. The military does to respond to that humanitarian crisis, and honestly, I would be honored to be helping that capacity. They actually, it's a little known fact, but the Army runs a kind of a third world place in Honduras for medical procedures, which is an option for me to go to as well. And just the ability to touch those people's lives, not in a war-fighting capacity, but just in a humanitarian issue, is something that's really would just have tremendous benefit on on me personally, probably more than the person I'm actually helping. So especially with COVID, there was a lot of medical personnel, mostly ICU nurses, nurse practitioners, physicians, that were mobilized to areas of the country that could not handle the influx. A lot of people I know have been to South Texas, El Paso, border cities that had an influx of people. I don't know many people that were in the Northeast region that I've talked to personally. I'm sure there were, but they just got called up within a couple weeks and said, "Hey, we need you here to help out." A good friend that came up, he was actually a physical therapist. He got called up to the Capitol incident that happened at the end of 2020, and so he had spent 3 weeks there. It was kind of crazy. I'm just sitting beside him on the bus, and he was like, "Hey, check out this picture," and he's sleeping in the rotunda of the Capitol on the ground, and he was sleeping, but he was taking a picture of the photographer who was taking a picture of him, and so he was just like, it escalated so quickly to that. As a National Guard, he's liable on the state level more. So within 4 hours, Virginia said, "Hey, you're going." And then first it was just "Hey, you're going" as a peacemaker. And next thing you know, he said, "We're getting handed full ammunition." And he was like, "I don't know what's happening." So, that obviously was just a show of force, but it did keep the peace and no one was injured after it. So, he made a joke. He was like, "I'm just a physical therapist." But as the military currently is training, the biggest push is to be everyone to be prepared. The biggest thing that they're trying to show is everybody can be prepared, because everybody is a soldier at some point, and if you're caught in a bad situation, everybody has to be all hands on deck. And then kind of the outlook, as always, is probably, the bigger countries, the bigger threats, they have the bigger weapons, and so you have to have more of a mass soldier mindset to help, instead of being highly specialized and having some troops do some and some not. So everybody needs to be on kind of one level, and then you revert back to your job.
The mobile hospitals, I'm going back to old television MASH.
That's exactly what you're thinking. Yes,
okay.
ma'am. So typically, at first, in the first area, it's all tent cities. Correct. Yeah, it's just and then eventually, they bring in the Connex containers, and then those grow into a well fortified place. But typically, at first, it's right out the gate, just mesh tents with air conditioning, sealed off, but over time they will. The specialized surgery teams, they just kind of do anesthesia in the back of pickups, or commandeer a medical building. And so it just depends on what mission you get. You really don't get assigned to those. You can be assigned to those prior to, but as far as my profession, if I joined on to someone's unit, because I'm able to switch unit to unit, just to fill in the needs of the Army, I could go somewhere, and then they could, from that point, they could say, "Hey, do you want to join this group?" And then from that point, we kind of have to change what we do as far as an anesthesia-wise, from going to an established place of security, and we have pre-care and post-care from anesthesia, until somewhere that's very remote, and I'm doing pre-post intra-care. So it's just a different mindset. You kind of have a different packing list, really.
Does that diversity appeal to you?
Yes, I could. That was the main reason that I got into anesthesia. I always make a joke, is I couldn't fit on a rescue helicopter with my size, with my height. I could, but all the flight team was probably less than 5'10", and they kind of laughed at me, trying to. When I got on the helicopter, and I realized that I couldn't be doing that for 30 years. And then in the ICU, which I love my coworkers, but the ICU is typically, patients take a few weeks to get better, and I like more of the diversity of, I could have a 70-year-old with a hip fracture, or a 3-year-old working on their tonsils, or go from open heart surgery to your little, no surgery's little, but fixing somebody's broken finger. That's just, to me, that appeals, just the complexity of the nature of the job. I feel more at home there.
How do your coworkers feel about this new addition to your career?
I'm very fortunate. My bosses, 2 of them are retired Air Force, and so they are perfectly at home with it. They think it's great, and they always mess with me because they're Air Force and I'm Army. There are some ex-Navy people in there as well, so we kind of have the normal banter back and forth. As of now, because I'm able to see so far ahead, it hasn't really created a bond on on my small group of people, and so nobody's really complained to me. But they're very able to work with me if something comes up immediately. Most people understand completely what's going on, and they're perfectly willing to help out.
You mentioned 30 years. Are you thinking of serving that long?
I'd love to be honest with you. I haven't. I just feel like, I mean, I'm only 35. In reality, I still have more than half my lifespan statistically, and so that would be my goal, is to be 55 plus still in. So who knows? But
very good. Have you learned? Of course, you've still got your medical Army training to go, but has anything that you've learned from being in service thus far impacted how you practice in civilian life?
Not as far as, well, I will have to say, pushing me out of my comfort zone. Everybody gets in a routine of the same thing. So I have to have more of the mindset of alternative medications. Typically, if you have a strong drug, you can give it, but its effects and how they linger, you have to think about how that drug affects somebody when you don't have immediate care post-op to handle that. I do a lot of cardiovascular cases currently, and so the biggest thing with trauma is blood. So I'm pretty familiar in that aspect of blood replacement. And I've just done a lot of reading on military medicine. So I think, to me, it's kind of changed that for me, because I got out of the rut and I pushed myself. The upcoming training I'm actually really excited about. I have to, when we get there, you have to learn how to recover a person that's injured under fire, which may seem like a small thing, but it's in reality, the grand scheme, when you're practice rounds, it's probably not that big of a deal, but in reality it is. But I have to learn how to call in a medevac helicopter, a 9-line, and then we actually load patients onto the helicopter, pretend patients, and then we actually get on the helicopter and fly out with them. We have a 72-hour field training exercise that I'm really excited about. You have to do land navigation from like hospital to hospital or patient care area. So typically those rucks are between 3 to 5 miles in between, from what I've read. So to me, I'm at home. I love being outside, so that just sounds really interesting.
Navigation skills?
Yeah, I'm actually better. I grew up in the woods, so reading the military map was, you had to learn what their specific thing, and then I also had to forget what my backwoods learning. But it was a lot of fun. We there's urban and night and day, and then it all changes too when your stride length changes based on how much weight you have. It's just to me it's fun, just being out there.
What would you tell someone, and I'm not looking for a recruitment ad, but somebody that was thinking about doing this?
It's really, it has to be in your heart, to be honest with you. It's, my wife always jokes there's something wrong with my paperwork. So I'm either redoing it, or, if the administration personnel changes, somebody wants something different, which we just did a switch of platoon leadership, and actually the leadership of the whole unit. So it has to be in your heart, but because I know that I don't have to do it. I could easily sit at home and be comfortable and play with the kids. But once you know that you're doing it because it's something you love, it gives you that sense of pride that you're helping. I mean, only 1% of the country is supposedly served in the military or serving in the military. And so currently, so that was kind of, when you think about that, I am a 1%er, so it's kind of rare. And just honestly, once you get into training, I've met so many amazing people from around the country. A nurse from North Dakota who wanted to be in the National Guard so much she left her kids. One was 6 months old. 6 months after giving birth, she went through. She became a combat medic and then got promoted to nurse in the National Guard. She wanted to serve so much. people that have came from the Ivory Coast who were absolutely amazing. They told me they're flying into Dallas in 2011 and 12 and couldn't read the exit sign on the airport. But they love this country so much. Just the diversity, but we're all actually mended together with the one common purpose. Besides being at home with a family, I could easily see how that is your second family. I wanted people to know, to me, I couldn't see being perfectly healthy, perfectly fit, blessed to live here, and just hanging back and not doing this. It really bothered me. Sorry. So
No, I totally understand. Thank you. Let's do